Thank you. We'll move on to our bill discussion. I should say, Mr. Archer, I'm sorry, we've taken up a little bit too much time, so we're probably going to need part of it here and part of it in our next meeting.
That's fine.
Any questions with the bills? Give me a second, because I need to.
Well, you're looking, Mr. President, I just got one. So I know there was a large payout for the trail.
Yes.
They haven't even
So they,
laid a speck of asphalt yet.
So they put the trail, or the curb and gutter down, and then they patched Limber Drive, so about, well, it's 4-foot width strip, 4-foot strip along Limber Drive is completed. So that's what made
Okay.
that for you.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
That's my question. I had something written down there, but that's what I had to deal with. And that, correct, is being reimbursed from
That's correct, from the DNR, yes.
Thank you. Are there any other questions with the bills? Consent agenda items, any discussion with that?
Yes, Mr. President, I have a request. I'd like to make a motion to suspend the rules when it comes to the old bill with ordinance 19-7 series with Barrett Industries, where instead of making a motion to vote on it right away, that we could open up the discussion first. I have some questions that I really want answered.
This is our work session, so we don't do any motions during the work session. And we're talking about the consent agenda items right now. So section 6 in your agenda, right here. If there aren't any consent agenda items, Mr. Archer, please, for our audit. Thank you, and sorry to keep you waiting.
that's okay. Thanks for having me here tonight. If you said that this might run into, you might have to come back
I
at some
didn't know how
point.
much, we usually stop at 7:25 with our work session to move to our regular meeting at 7:30, so we can start that one on time. So if you need more time, then we'll just make time at the beginning of our next official regular
I'll try to
meeting.
talk fast. How about that?
That would be wonderful, thank
Okay,
you.
perfect. So your audit report itself is about 120 pages. So I figure if I cover about 1 page every 5 seconds or so, we will be good, right? I do have handouts here, a PowerPoint presentation. I don't see it up on the screen. Do you want me to just dig right into it here?
Go ahead.
Okay,
We've
so-
got it in our packet.
So you all have a report like this?
Yep.
We're gonna flip to the first page in there to talk a little bit about the audit itself. And specifically what we're going to talk about here is the opinion that we're giving on your audit. And so I think you're all pretty well aware of what we do in an audit. I won't get into all that, but I want to let you all know that the opinion that we're giving is an unmodified opinion. That's us saying that after going through our procedures, we believe that our opinion is that your financial statements are fairly presented in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. That's the opinion that you all want to receive, and that's what the state auditor wants to see also, okay? If we move into the next page where we talk about audit results, this page and then the following page, we're actually talking about some required communications that us as auditors have to communicate to you all. And so here we're talking about our audit process. When we're going through, when we're looking at your records, dealing with your management, do we have any issues, difficulties? Do we see any unusual type transactions? Any alternative ways that we would prefer to see you account for anything? And we didn't have any of that. In terms of estimates, we take a look at your estimates that you have. The highest risk estimate that we look at is the value of your pension plan, and specifically I'm talking about PARA. That's determined by an actuary, so we look at the inputs that the actuaries are using to kind of make sure that they're making decisions based on accurate data. In terms of new accounting standards, you don't have any this year. You will see some coming in the following years related to your fiduciary activities. You've got an agency fund that we may have to change how we account for things. And then a couple of years beyond that, we're going to be looking at how we account for your leases, but nothing that's going to affect you this year. Working with your management, they were easy to work with. They gave us the information that we asked for. We didn't get the feeling like they were trying to withhold information from us, which is important from an auditor's perspective. Quick to respond, so the audit process really went fairly well. In terms of adjustments during our audit process, we didn't propose any adjustments that we would consider to be material. So when we're going through, we're looking at your records and looking at the schedules that your management provides to us, we didn't have any significant adjustments or changes that we made to that. Your management team does outsource posting of a number of adjustments for us to handle for them, but that's all done by information that's provided by them. So we're not making up the numbers for you or helping create the numbers. You're providing them to us and we're recording them in the audited financials for you. In terms of internal controls, the next 2 pages here, same internal control items that you've had for a number of years now. One is that you've got a smaller accounting staff, and so you've got a lack of proper segregation of duties in your accounting function. Very common for a city your size or even a city much larger than you. And the other is that we draft your financial statements for you. So the 120 pages that I'm trying to knock through in a few minutes here, we wrote that for you. That's been outsourced to us. Okay. As a part of our audit process, we look at compliance with Minnesota statutes. And some examples of that might be whether you're bidding like you're supposed to be bidding or getting quotes, receiving quotes when you're supposed to receive a quote. We look at some conflict of interest type items. We look at the structure of your cash accounts to make sure you've got enough collateral pledged on those accounts, among other things. When we went through that process, we had no issues or non-compliance that we identified. Okay, we're going to look at some numbers here really quickly. And so what we'll do is we'll start with the governmental funds first, and then we'll shift over into the business type or enterprise funds. So starting with the general fund first, if we look at this year's activity compared to what you had budgeted for, this year's revenues came in at $5.39 million. You had budgeted $5.26 million, so you're about $132,000 higher than budget in the general fund. If we were to drill down on that detail, you'd see that you had really the largest variance there is that licenses and permits came in higher than what you had anticipated. In terms of spending, you budgeted $4.19 million. Actual spending came in at $4.24 million, so about $54,000 higher than budget on spending. If you were to look at the page in the audited financials to look at the variances here, you'd see actually most spending categories were slightly above budget, other than public works, which was lower than budget. So the public works kind of neutralized some things downward. Overall, you plan for a break-even year. Fund balance actually increased by $54,000. And so with that, your fund balance at the end of the year is $2.2 million in the general fund. If we look at that fund balance relative to the size of your city's operations, it works out to be about 37% of a year's expenditures sitting in your unassigned fund balance. You have a policy on what that floor is, which is 35% of expenditures, so you're slightly above that minimum policy that you have. Even though we had an increase in fund balance this year, because of the growth in expenditures this year, as a percent of expenditures, your fund balance actually went down by 1%. In terms of cash continues to build in the general fund, although not at a rapid pace over the last 2 years. That dip in 2015 actually is related to some dollars that were loaned to another fund for the 2015 petitions project. So it's a little bit misleading there. You can probably ignore that. And the year before also is related to some loaned out money to a project. Cash at the end of the year in the general fund is $1.65 million. So you all have a number of funds. What we do is we take a major fund approach. So we look at what funds have the most activity, and we report on those here. The remaining funds get lumped together in that column on the far right, non-major governmental funds. So what I'll do is really briefly, I'll just walk through these funds quick. EDA is the first column here. EDA had an increase in fund balance of $96,000. Most of the activity going on in here relates to some levy dollars that you had coming in, as well as repayments for loans that you all had made out of the EDA. And then spending is related to community development type activities. You've got a transfer in of or some other activity of $54,000, partially related to a sale of property, partially related to some transfer activity. This fund at the end of the year has a fund balance of just under $700,000. EDA loan fund, similar type activity here. The revenues coming in are primarily loan receipts or repayments coming from loans that you've made out, and similar type expenditures. These are all economic development related expenditures, primarily making loans. This fund had an increase in fund balance of $7,400. Ending fund balance at the end of the year is $2.7 million. Equipment reserve, most of this activity is capital related, so capital outlay, you purchase some equipment. Overall, this fund had an increase in fund balance of $220,000. That's actually been subsidized by a transfer coming from the general fund. Had that not happened, it would have spent down. Ending fund balance is $1.8 million here. Debt service is very prescribed, but the bulk of the activity is actually not even shown on this page. It's netted on the line of other. You had about $910,000 of bond proceeds coming in, and then you transferred those dollars out to the 2017 petition fund. So because they came in and then transferred out again, they're netted out here. Otherwise, making your principal and interest payments as you should be. We do a deep dive on that during the audit to make sure that these are being allocated out between the different debt service funds like they should be, to make sure you're making these timely, and we look at the compliance aspect of it too, and everything looked good there. Petition projects fund, this is a newer fund for you all. Really the bulk of the activity here is just the actual construction activity going on, about $1.76 million worth. This fund has a deficit at the end of the year of $1.7 million, which is typical for you all because you generally do the work and then you fund it after the fact in the fund. Non-major governmental fund, like I mentioned before, this is a lot of funds combined together. A few takeaways that you're not going to get from this page though. For the special revenue funds that you all have, all of these funds now have a positive fund balance. And that wasn't necessarily always the case. Capital project funds, some of these do have deficit fund balances. I jotted them down here. I probably don't need to go through them all, but that's normal for a lot of these capital project funds because, like I mentioned earlier, you tend to do the work and then you make the fund whole after the project's done. In terms of cash, debt service cash is spent down a little bit over the past few years. Like I said, debt service is very prescribed, so I'm not concerned about this. I'm not, the concern you would have in debt service is, do we have enough money set aside for future principal and interest payments? Based on what I've seen, I'm not concerned with that. EDA loan fund is steadily increased, although this year took a small dip, and the EDA fund has increased a little bit over the past few years. Looking at the next page here, equipment reserves got about $1.7 million in it. Non-major is kind of all over the place, and that's typical with these, especially with the capital projects included with them. And petition project fund has no cash yet. Okay, we're going to look at your enterprise or business type funds here now. Starting with the water fund. Water fund had revenues of $1.6 million. Spending of $1.12 million. The revenue is actually down a little bit from last year, and that's primarily driven because of a decrease in consumption. You had some increases in your business rates this year, which has offset that a little bit, but the primary reason for that decrease in revenue is consumption driven. Overall, this fund had $475,000 of operating income. From there, we've got a large transfer out. This is related to the completion of the water project. So with that large transfer out, this net position did spend down by almost $700,000.
I don't know if that would be a good spot to pause.
We sure can, yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Lori, I'm just gonna ask because we did have we can make a real brief utility billing clerk.
Yes, we have that on the agenda for action tonight. We did receive, I believe, 83 applicants. We did phone interviews, interviewed 10 individuals. We do have a recommendation for you on the agenda.
Okay, then we will adjourn until 7:30 for our regular meeting.
Okay, so what you've been watching here is the Little Falls, Minnesota City Council work session, where a lot of people spoke actually for and against the Barrett Petfoods Innovation coming into the industrial park named Chief Hole today, which some people find offensive. That some people that spoke were concerned about being disrespectful to him and his various grounds that are just above this plant is going to see it. There aren't normally this many people. I think that there was a gal here that came all the way from Cold Spring that spoke against the pet foods manufacturing coming in because she would have been interested in maybe purchasing a property over in the Anderson distribution behind the old store, but she stated emphatically that she's not interested in coming in with even a possibility of coming in manufacturing. Another person here, the gal in the Burgundy, spoke. She's an educator and she's an author, and she spoke passionately and stated that her concern was for the special needs kids with all kinds of autism and sensory issues that are going to be taught at the Midstate Education building, which is directly across the street where this proposed pet food plant is. And she stated emphatically that her concern was mostly for the special needs kids and them getting an education. And most importantly, Simone Bolin, from the Midstate Education District. She's right over there beyond the Barrett, Sarah and Tom Barrett. She's speaking with them now. Spoke and stated that her first priority is the welfare of her students in the district, and that they come from all over, including Swanville, Uppsala, and Onamia, Peters, and not Long Prairie, but Little Falls and Royalton also. And when they go out to play in the playground area behind the Midstate Education building that is almost built now, the playground equipment was being installed at a date. The students will start attending in September of 2019, and her concern was that they are not going to be able to enjoy their playtime and playground out back because of potential noise and stench in that area. And she asked that this item be not passed until the school district, Midstate Education District, had a chance to meet with and make sure that all the issues that they're concerned about are mitigated with the Barrett Petfoods family. So there you have it. Well, the council meeting starting here any moment, and I spoke firmly against, and I gave my reasons. And so when this is done recording live, you can watch from the beginning all the comments, including mine. Once it's put on my Facebook page, and that will occur sometime after this film is finished. Thank you so much for watching. I know we had, gosh, there's probably about, oh, there. Hi, Andrew. There's a whole bunch of people watching on here. Interesting things all watching here. I appreciate everybody tuning in. And Andrew Henderson, of course, is my free speech buddy. He was arrested and they confiscated his camera down in, oh, I'm gonna have to stop here because they're calling a meeting to me. Thanks for watching. This is Little Falls, Minnesota City Council.
which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All individuals are asked to either silence or turn off all cell phones, pagers, and other electronic devices that may disrupt the meeting. Approval of the agenda. Approve the agenda as posted in accordance with the open meeting law, and herein place all agenda items on the table for discussion. I would like to entertain a motion to make an alteration to the agenda where we have awards, donations, and presentations. We will put Mr. John Archer in there to finish our audit information. So what should the council?
Mr. President, I move to approve the revised agenda. I'll second it.
Motion by Councilmember Hensel, second by Councilmember Hildebrand. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Approval of the minutes. Special work session, strategic planning meeting of June 17, 2019. Special work session meeting of June 17, 2019. And the regular meeting of June 17, 2019 approved. What's the wish of the council?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Goshek, second by Councilmember Storley. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Approval of the bills. Checks 100829 through 100909, totaling $824,637.68 approved. What is the wish of the council?
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Knopfler, second by Councilmember Lundberg. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Mr. Archer.
Thank you. Thank you for bumping me up ahead too. We left off talking about the water utility fund. Before I move on, just because we kind of cut it off, any questions before I move on? Okay, we're going to move on here then. So the next fund that we're going to talk about is the wastewater fund. Wastewater fund really had very similar operations compared to in the past, but because the wastewater fund primarily is billed based on water consumption, that decrease in water consumption that affected the water fund is also affecting the wastewater fund, which you can see on this page here. So with that, revenues this year came in at $2,059,000, down from last year, which was $2,334,000. With that, though, we still were able to have operating income of $870,000. This fund, after all transfers, all other activity, had an increase in net position of $749,000. Looking at stormwater fund next, stormwater had remarkably similar operations compared to last year, with operating loss of $5,900. Beyond that, we've got some transfer activity. This fund had a decrease in net position this year of just under $10,000. The net position in this fund too, I have on the page, is $798,000. Okay, municipal golf course is the next fund. The golf course has got some activity going on. If you remember back to last year, we had an increase in expenditures in the golf course, mostly because of some improvements that you all had done in that year, which you can see on that red line that kind of peaks in last year. This year is a little bit more normalized, but we're still looking at an operating loss in the golf course, which isn't unusual for the golf course if we look at the trend over the last 5 years or so, and beyond that also. So the golf course had a operating loss of $143,000. From there, we've got some non-operating revenues coming in, totaling $122,000. This is also partially transfers. This fund had a change in net position of a deficit of $37,000. If we look at the next page here, I've actually got some metrics here on golf course operations in terms of gross profit. If we look at the gross profit here, and we're going to just focus maybe on the last 3 years, gross profit has steadily decreased slightly over the past 3 years. And if you look at how this is broken up, we've got pro shop activity, we've got food pop candy activity, and we've got liquor sales. Pro shop, we're not going to worry much about pro shop because there's actually very little pro shop inventory and sales going on anymore. If we rewind back to 2015 and 2016, you can see actually negative gross profit in those areas. That's because there was a significant write-off of obsolete inventory in those years. And so they've been written off on an accounting treatment. You maybe still have it, but the value of it had diminished enough that it was written down. But looking at maybe more specifically the food sales and the liquor sales, there has been a small decrease in gross profit over the last 3 years here. In the last number of years, I can't even remember going back how far now, we've had management letter advice comments about golf course operations, profitability. I did make a remark to Lori that this is probably the last year that I'm going to include those comments in here, mostly because I don't want to keep repeating the same thing year after year after year. And I think you all have come to accept the operations of the golf course. New recommendation this year, though, is that maybe you want to look at the frequency of how often you're making cash deposits. So the cash on hand at the golf course. Best practice would be to deposit it daily, and that's maybe not always happening. Okay, recycling and garbage fund. Here the biggest activity is that we've got a full year with the new billing structure, with the new canisters and everything. And so you're kind of seeing the first real year of operations here. Total revenue coming in at $693, so just under $700,000. We've got operating expenses of $639,000, so we've got operating income of $53,000. This fund had an increase in fund balance or net position of $20,000 this year. And this page has got the cash trends. I won't go into the detail on all of them other than to point out that the decrease in cash this year in the water utility fund is because of the completion of that water project. Okay, this page and the next page take a look at the health of your city with all funds combined as a whole. And it also adds in things like the value of your capital assets, which aren't recorded in fund financials, and the dollar amount of long-term debt, which is going to be on the next page here. If we look at the overall size of your city's assets this year, and actually really over the last 5 years, there's not a lot of movement. And if we look specifically at the current assets, which is the blue category here, that's things like your cash, your receivables that you have that are going to be converted to cash in the next year. They're very similar as well. Really, the growth in total assets this year is driven by capital investments that you've made, so construction activity and equipment purchases. If we look at the next page here and look at the liability, the liabilities of the city, these have been decreasing over the last 4 years. There was a slight uptick in from 14 to 15. The green represents your pension liabilities, and the reason that there are no pension liabilities recorded in 2014 is because the standard that required the recording of those didn't happen until 2015. But if we look at this, the biggest takeaway here is that your long-term debt has been steadily decreasing over the last 4 years, which you're actually going to see on the next page also. This is broken up governmental activities and business type activities. Business type funds have long-term debt of $1.65 million at the end of the year. Governmental funds have long-term debt of $11,555,000. If I would have had 5 more minutes, I would have got through this at the work session, but just didn't quite talk fast enough. Any questions at all on the audit or our process or anything I went over or anything I didn't go over?
Mr. President, I would just add, John, that you've been doing this for a long time, and I appreciate the abbreviated form with just as much information as we ever got. So, and I've heard this from numerous entities I belong to, so thank you for that, because it's much easier to digest and grasp in this form than it is with 140 pages.
Thank
Next will be our consent agenda. 2018 audit, Schlenner Winter received. Application to conduct excluded bingo, American Legion Auxiliary, Morrison County Fair, approved. Fire report, May 2019, received. Hire Noah Bozer, laborer, streets and parks, authorize and approve. Liability insurance waiver, League of Minnesota Cities Insurance Trust, deny. Show dance license, Great River Arts, Arts in the Park, July 27, 2019, approved. Show license, Haiti Partnership, First United Church, August 3rd, 2019, approved. What is the wish of the council?
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second it.
Motion by Councilmember Storey, second by Councilmember Goshek to approve the consent agenda. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. No public hearings or lettings. Next will be old business. Ordinance number 18, 7th series, amend City Code Chapter 4, Municipal and Public Utilities, Section 4.20, cross-connection control, introduced 6/17/2019. Adopt. What is the wish of the City Council?
Mr. President, I'll make a motion to adopt ordinance number 18, cross-connection control. I'll second that.
Motion by Councilmember Goshek, second by Councilmember Kanafa. Any discussion?
Wrong councilman.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes, Mr. President.
Motion by Councilmember Henson, sorry about that.
I didn't notice I was preparing to ask my question.
Go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, thanks, Mr. President. Greg, I'm just wondering are we catching up on something here that was missed, addressing a specific situation, or what's the?
No, so every year we go through it and we have one member from the Department of Health kind of go through in our water plant as well as our ordinance just to see if we're missing anything. They made a recommendation to include something such as this. It is in state code that it's a requirement to have these tested, but we don't have anything in our ordinance to say if you don't test it or if there's an issue, then we have the ability to, turn off the water or do something like that. So it's more of a preventative measure. We haven't had any issues with any cross connections, but
I was just wondering, we didn't
yeah,
look at something for a permitting issue and go, oh, look at that. That's not cool.
trying to be proactive.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Council President, I just want to clarify this, the backflow prevention device. So this is, correct me if I'm wrong, so if somebody is on city water and they also have a well, that well could potentially backflow and contaminate our city water, and this is to prevent that?
So we don't allow a well to be hooked up to our city water system. So we would not be able to allow any sort of connection. These are mainly for fire suppression systems where you have potentially a fire truck that would hook up to a sprinkler system, which would then boost the pressure, could potentially come back into our system. We want to make sure that there's a backflow preventer so that when it boosts that pressure, it doesn't come back into our system, it stays in the building itself. And so that's